So what does Genesis 3:15 mean? This is in response to a question that came in related to that chart I just had that had Genesis 3:15 and all those combinations of verses. Here was the question: Ron, what do you think the meaning of Genesis 3:15 is? I've understood it was supposed to be about Jesus, but it never made sense to me. Well, thank you for the question, and I'm more than happy to think about this. The best way to understand a verse, of course, is to think like the original audience and imagine hearing it in their ears. So let's think in terms of the snake or the serpent, and there's Adam and Eve. And here's how Genesis 3:14 and 15 go. God is talking to the snake, and he says, "Cursed you are more than any beast of the field. On your belly you'll go. The dust of the ground you will eat. And I, God, will set hatred between you," that's the snake, "and the woman, and between your seed," that's a collective noun, so it includes plural items like children. It's the same word for descendants or children. So that hatred would go between you and the woman, and between your children and her children. And then it ends by saying, "And they," or it, they, "will strike or bite or bruise your head, and you will strike," same word, "or bruise or bite their feet," or heel, or the word is very general, ankle, foot, step, or hoof. It's just trying to make, in poetic sense, it's going to be a head versus foot kind of relationship. So I would say that if you are hearing this for the first time, you would think of it as a snake being stepped on by a human. There's going to be hatred between you and the woman, and then all the children of the snakes and of the women. The relationship will be that it will be the head of the serpent versus the foot of the human. My initial, again, interpretation of this, I think, is just to look at it, again, as an Adam and Eve walking out of the garden. What would they have thought? This is about the snake. This is about the snake. This is about the snake. And so I would take this to be about the snake as well. That there would be enmity between humans and snakes from here on out. Here's how John Calvin interpreted this passage in about the late 1500s. "I interpret this simply to mean that there should always be the hostile strife between the human race and serpents, which is now apparent, for by a secret feeling of nature, man abhors them." The New Interpreter's Study Bible says this in the footnote, or the study note: "The curse on the snake introduces the peculiar animosity between humans and snakes. Humans kill snakes by striking their heads, while snakes attack humans by striking their heads." It does add a special note. Some early Jewish and Christian interpreters of this verse understood this verse as a reference to the Messiah's coming victory over Satan. Here is the Jewish Study Bible's interpretation of this verse, again in the study notes. In 3:15, "The serpent is to lose his legs, slither in the dirt, and suffer from the hostility of human beings. The woman will suffer pain in childbirth," etc. So that's the Jewish Study Bible. So the idea, again, is very I think straightforward. There's nothing beyond just what Adam and Eve would have understood to be a curse on the snake and his relationship and the children of the snake and the woman. That is, generationally, there's going to be animosity, hatred, and so forth between snakes and humans. Well, here's what happens, and here's what causes the discussion about Jesus. Okay, there is in the crucifixion scene someday that it is a means of capital punishment whereby the heel of the offender is bruised, right, because of the nail into the foot. In Romans 16 verse 20, we have the reference to, and I won't write it out, but you will crush Satan underfoot shortly. Crush Satan under your feet shortly. By the way, this is 33 AD. Romans is about 52 AD. In Revelation 12:9 and 20 verse 2, it says that the serpent of old, or the devil. So it equates the serpent and the devil in Revelation, both of these passages in 12 and 20. And Revelation can be dated, around 80 to 90, somewhere in there. Well, these passages were taken by Irenaeus in 180 AD. And notice that none of these passages, nothing from Adam through all the way the rest of the Bible, there was never any conversation about this passage in relation to Jesus. But because of the crucifixion, bruising the offender's heel, and because of the statement that we will crush Satan under our feet, and that the serpent is the devil, those three passages were taken by Irenaeus, who was a bishop of a church, in 180. They brought Irenaeus to say or make this comment, and I'll read it to you. He has therefore in his work of recapitulation summed up all things, Jesus now, both waging war against our enemy and crushing him who had at the beginning led us away captive in Adam, and trampled under his head, as thou canst perceive in Genesis that God said to the serpent, And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. He shall be on the watch for thy head, and thou on the watch for his heel. That's the comment that Irenaeus makes again. And then, of course, from that time forward, others, Augustine and so forth, began to see that preaching point where looking this direction at these ideas and the word connections between the heel and the feet and the crushing and the head and those sorts of things, that they took these ideas and then read them back into this story, so that the idea was that this is about Jesus and the serpent being the devil, and Jesus defeating the devil. So that's where that comes from. It comes from a reading in 180 AD backwards through three texts that don't mention this passage, but there's connections in words and phrases, and that's how it is done. So that's how I understand Genesis 3. I would take it as Calvin did, and as the Jewish Study Bible does, and that is, it's as simple as that humans and snakes will not get along. Why does this matter? Because as soon as we say, like this text here, that this means something, then what we're saying is that this person who is living at the moment of the verse is responsible for what it means, and they're going to read the story that they're living through differently, as opposed to saying that there's some interesting connections. Do you see the difference between that idea? To say there's connections between the words of these verses and this verse here is different than saying this person living at that time should have understood and is responsible, in fact, for the information that was passed along here. So I would be much more happy with saying that Genesis 3:15 has interesting connections in the future, but that's all. It did not mean that Jesus and the serpent would actually go to war.